Good morning. It is 7 a.m. on Wednesday, August 18th here in the WCA Secondary School Media Center. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is over here today for some reason.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then a couple of notes for this morning's meeting. The board is not required to hear comments, but chooses to allow the public a chance to address the board only during the public comment segment of this meeting. Individual speakers are asked to limit their comments to not more than 2 minutes. The remainder of the meeting is designated for the board to conduct the business before them without interruption or unsolicited feedback. The board asks that all comments be civil, courteous, and respectful. Individuals viewing a recording of this meeting may direct comments to questions@isd2342.org. Our mission statement is to challenge and support our students, staff, and families in each person's growth as an engaged learner and successful citizen of our community. We'll move into roll call, starting with Christensen. Here. Gross. Here. Nessman is here. Sabalik. Here. Sandstead. Here. Strunk. Here. And Ulrich. Okay. Moving into the public comment portion of our meeting, I do believe we have a few individuals that have joined us this morning that wish to address the board. Mr. Spence Swanson. It's not, so we're recording today. Got it.
How many of you have read the Diary of Anne Frank or Hiding Place? So what do you think has changed in the last 30 years since our students don't read them? But instead they read a book called Night or In the Mouth of the Wolf. How many have read or heard of these books? Touching Spirit Bear, Fever, The House on Mango Street, or Into the Wild. We have all of our juniors reading an Agatha Christie mystery novel. That's not part of the elective class, it's required. These books check off a lot of intersectionality and politically correct boxes, but where do they fit in the great canon of Western literature? Here are some of the books our students don't read because they're spending time reading these lesser modern works. Lord of the Flies, 1984. Animal Farm, of Mice and Men. The Odyssey, The Iliad. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, or Tom Sawyer. Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre. Moby Dick, The Red Badge of Courage, Great Expectations, A Tale of Two Cities, and The Old Man and the Sea. This is a small selection of classical books from the Western literature that the students don't read because they're reading some of these other modern books. So why are our standards so low? How can this be considered a quality education? This appears to be a dumbing down of the curriculum, which is completely in line with the Communist Party goals. You, the school board, are managers of the district. People you hired have implemented this curriculum. Therefore, if you disagree with this curriculum, you can change it. On the other hand, if you agree with the curriculum, your point has been made too by your next. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Keith Swanson.
Well, I don't have anything big per peg. About 2 minutes ago, I decided to maybe say a couple comments. And this is nothing earth-shattering to you people either, but it always concerns me when we look at the votes that's going to take place in November, and you've got the 3 separate options, and when we need an upgraded athletic facilities here at this building, and when I see that there's 3 separate options that people are going to vote on, I think option 3 is dead in the water. And I would like, and maybe the state tells you this, maybe your school board association tells you how you all have to set all this up. But I would have much seen you roll that all together, one option, total amount of money, and we do everything. You talk about bringing new kids here, new students, looking more attractive. And I've been here since day one, and we need our athletic facilities upgraded. Thank you.
And then we have Sarah Schmall.
I was happy to see your safe return to school plan as it was presented to us via the email. And I've taken a lot of time looking into that. I'm sure you've taken a lot of this into consideration, hoping that what was emailed to us is what's also presented to us today. The COVID poses almost no risk to our kids. 4.2 million kids have been diagnosed with COVID. only 0.008% have died. In 2018, the CD recorded 480,000 kids getting the flu, but yet we did not mask that year. That's more than COVID in the last 1.5 years. So I'm hoping that you take some of these statistics into consideration throughout the years. I'm sure things will be presented to us to possibly change this plan. There's numerous psychological damage to our kids with our masks, and I truly hope that the plan that was presented is what we get presented to us today for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Michael, did you wish to address the board this morning?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Did you have anything for the board? No? Okay. We will move on to our agenda. There are no proposed modifications as it stands right now. Any requests for changes to the agenda as it's presented? If not, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. And a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, the same sign. Moving on to C, approval of the minutes which were supplied for you in the board packet. Any questions or comments on the minutes from 7/21/21 or 8/4/21? If not, I'll ask for approval of the minutes in the packet as presented. And a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to approval of the payment of claims. Mr. Sabella, did you have any you wanted to address with the board this morning?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve $407,297.87. Three checks I'll call the board's attention. We paid our property and casual liability insurance for the full year 22, which was $75,452.59. That went to the insurance company. We paid for upgraded football lighting this month, which was $6,600 to Musco. We also paid some rec swimming lessons of $25.50 for the YMCA.
Very good. So there's a motion by Mr. Sabolic to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $470,297.87. Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to our administrative reports. Ms. Morkey, would you like to join us at the board table this morning?
Just a couple of things. You guys got my board report. Is there any questions about, or anybody that wants to look more in depth at the survey that we put out at all? Pretty much what we kind of expected what we would get. There's a couple of things that popped up as ideas that people would like to see. One of those being coding, and we do have a cool coding opportunity coming up. We're just trying to finalize what that looks like. It doesn't start until October, and it is virtual, but we're going to put out a fall brochure. We have a couple of cool things that are coming up that we're trying to get together so that when we start in September. Typically, I like to stay away from September activities, but there's a lot of stuff that people want to get going, and we will do that. AARP has canceled again due to the Delta variant, so all classes are canceled again through October. So now we have a class scheduled for here in October. Hopefully they can get a couple more people in this building. And so we'll see how that goes as we go along here. We're pretty much wrapped up with all of our summer activities. We have one swimming lessons session left, and that starts next week. And like I said before, we're working on a fall flyer to try to get things ready to go, and we'll be up and running again for fall activities. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Brash?
Good morning. There's not really too much going on at the elementary right now. We're just going to get back to the swing of things, so my report's a little short. But our summer school has been a huge success. The kids that have been coming have just been doing an awesome job. We really do want to thank the Prairie Ridge Hospital and the Kensington Cafe for the meals. The kids love them. So they've been really enjoying that every day. They have to rush up and find out what's in the little crate for their lunch. So that's really been good. And we do appreciate those people helping us out with those meals. We have our staff teachers filled out now. Joan Hanze accepted the kindergarten position, so she'll be joining us at North. We are in need of one more paraprofessional, and we have a couple of feelers out at this point, so we're hoping to get that filled very soon as well. We are continuing to get new kids, which is great. We're kind of getting them everywhere. Kindergarten through 4, they're coming in all over the place. This week, hopefully the end of this week or beginning of next week, we're mailing letters to families so that they know who their teacher is and when their early entrance conference time is, and all of that information too, which will be including some of the stuff about what's required from the CDC and those kinds of things too. We'll have a little reminder sheet in there for parents. And the last thing, of course, is our custodial staff has been outstanding this summer. Our buildings look spectacular, and it's because of all of their hard work. And I have to tell you, it is hot, very, very hot at both north and south, and they have been just doing an outstanding job. So they really do deserve some recognition for that. Any questions?
Thank you.
Good morning. We have a lot of things going on at the high school, which is super exciting. Clearly, we're excited to see all the athletes coming back in the building and running the track and in the gyms. So that's been exciting. We have had meetings with we have a secondary PTO now. We kind of started it last year a little bit, but this year we're hoping to have kind of a more robust and meaningful partnership with the secondary PTO. So we've met and kind of tried to focus on some key ideas, and initially some help with school supplies, because if you've been listening to the news at all, they're really concerned about just having enough school supplies for kids across the board everywhere. So, and I know that some of the stores have already run out of folders, different things like that. So that was kind of our first thing we were asking our secondary PTO for, is please help us with school supplies. We're afraid our families won't be able to find them. We had a change in the building with locks. So if you've ever seen our lockers, we have these built-in locks in them. And the kids are super smart, smarter than us, and they know how to get on the inside when you adjust the inside of that whole component, and it jams it. And so that's why when you walk down our hallways during the school year, the lockers are all like just bumped and open, because they won't engage anymore. Or kids try to use them and now their lockers jam completely. So we have to go in, the janitors come, and it's a mess. So we changed. We took those permanent locks out, and students are getting a combination padlock to put in there. And hopefully that will help avoid some of those jamming issues. It'll also free up our maintenance staff in the summers, because it takes 2 people a week to 2 weeks to reprogram those lockers every year, so that each of those built-in locks had a different combination every year. So the person prior to, so, and we were able to use some ESSER funds for that. So that was great, so that we could keep our maintenance people cleaning and getting the building ready, instead of spending time on the locks. So every year since I've been here, is my 3rd year, we're always talking about STEAM and things we're going to do in STEAM. And so I had a conversation with Mr. Hoagie about, well, is there a detailed plan somewhere that I'm missing, or what's going on with STEAM? And he said, well, not really that I'm aware of. So I visited with Ken Rosen from First Robotics. And I don't know if you've heard of other local schools having pretty robust robotics programs. And so I met with him about the possibility of WCA having a robotics program, and it feels very doable between some money we can get from Title IV funding for STEAM, well-rounded education, some grant money that the U of M can help us with through larger corporations, like your IBMs or different things like that, and some fundraising that we could potentially even start, if there's interest, and we can find an advisor, have a robust or a robotics team this year and go to the robotics competition in March. That'd be really exciting. We're going to move ahead with our fall musical. We've had some staff for a couple of years that have been asking about it, and COVID's been delaying it, and they did the groundwork and they created the budget and the plan. And so this year we thought, let's go for it. And so it will probably be a fall performance the week before Thanksgiving. So it's the week between So we are really crossing our fingers that COVID cooperates and allows us to perform, but we're gonna go ahead with that. The kids have been begging, please, 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 can we have a musical? And so we're gonna go ahead with that. We are gonna do early entrance conferences again this year for all students, 5th through 12th grade. We did it the last couple of years for COVID reasons and different things like that, and parents seem to really like it that all the kids are starting on the same date. We used to have some kids started on that first day, and then we had early entrance for the younger kids, and then with a different start date for those kids. So we're doing that, and I have quite a few things we're gonna go over with parents again this year. It really helps to set up those individual meetings and have them have an individual to talk to. So we're doing early entrance conferences. Had a surprise yesterday, kind of a fun surprise, Foxy's Lunch Wagon, because we have the weird one that starts at 11 and goes till 7. Foxy's Lunch Wagon is going to be here so parents can buy meals if they want to when they come to their early entrance conference. So I thought that was kind of cool and fun. Mimic what Natalie said about lunches, really excited. The lunches have been great. We appreciate Bear Care Center. Again, the kids get all excited about what's coming in their little basket, and the pickups have been amazing. You get there, it's all ready, it's at the door. It's been wonderful. And summer school's gone really well here as well. This Thursday will be their last day. Staffing, we filled our social studies position. I believe is on the agenda for approval. So that's wonderful. And then we're also trying to fill one more paraprofessional position. So I think we have our title positions filled, but our special education para position. I am concerned we've had a large number of students come in through that 5th through 9th grade, new students, and a large portion of them are special education with some pretty heavy needs. So I am concerned that we are not going to have enough paraprofessional staff even after we fill this position to meet the needs of all those students. So it might be something that we're going to have to look at down the line is adding a paraprofessional position for that. Any questions on anything?
No, when you said busy, you meant it. Thank you. Mr. Hope, you give a superintendent's report this morning.
I did email a report to you last night, it's on the screen, but before I get to the ones that I've stated, I want to address two other things. The USDA is providing free meals for students again this year, as they did all last year and the end of the previous year, and that's great for families that there's no charge for breakfast or for lunch for anybody, regardless of economic status. So that's the good part. The bad part is that when that occurs, we have families that aren't submitting the application for the free reduced meals, and we have funding that's based upon that, and also families have another opportunity for additional income as well. So Mindy is the individual in our district that sends out the applications for the free reduced meals. So we modified the information that came from the state, and we're making a plea for individuals to fill out that application. Because this past year, projection of lost revenue for one of our instructional programs is $100,000 because it's based partially on the free reduced count. So when we look at that, we want to try to recoup some of that money. And if we can't do that, it means a couple of things. Either the services aren't provided or we pull that from general fund and we're not getting that revenue from the state. So that's a big impact for the district. The other part for the district is there's some grants that become available at different times, and they're based upon that free reduced meal status. Now, in a typical year, WCA has about 35% of our families that are eligible for free reduced meals. And last year, that percent was down, which impacted us financially. So we're really encouraging families to submit that document. And the benefit that they would have is they have an opportunity for a EBT card. So when school is not in session, we're not serving the meals, that card has access to funds that they use for food purchases. So they have a financial benefit as the district has a financial benefit as well. So that document will go out probably this week to our families. It goes out every year, and we're really trying to get that free reduced count back up to where it had been previously. Another thing that's not on the list of things that I gave you is a bus update. Had a conversation with Steve, our transportation director, and the thing that really hit us last year is our buses could only be filled to about 50% capacity because And what they were doing is they were taking children away from our district, making short drops from our 3 sites, and then coming back and picking up other kids and then distributing the students that are further out. There's been questions asked, how does a neighboring school district get students home in the afternoon sooner than we do? And what he found out through an inquiry is that they have a bus that will leave the Alexandria area, for example, and they go directly to those outermost points. So they don't have any other drop-offs, that's just a bus that goes to the outer areas. So when I asked Steve, okay, with mask requirements on the bus, but no social distancing requirement on the bus, how will that impact us? And he said, we'll be going back to where we were previously, where the first pickup times will be scheduled between 7 and 7:25 in the morning, depending upon where people live on the routes. And then in the afternoon, their goal is to have everybody to their residence by 4:30 in the afternoon. So that would be the late time. So that still includes the shuttles that we have running between our communities and then getting all students home. So that's their goal. He did remind me that with road construction issues and inclement weather, that those times will fluctuate. So that's the update that I have as far as transportation and as far as food service. The other one, the CDC, and it's just over a week ago, in which they made an announcement, and as we finished the last school year, things were looking really good for us and for Minnesota, and the vaccinations were occurring, and the case rates were diminishing, and we had kind of expected that I thought I was going to burn my masks and we're going to throw away all of our PPE equipment. I didn't burn them; they're still in my dresser drawer, and we have PPE equipment still in stock here. So the situation for us now is the CDC made a statement a little over a week ago, and what I have on the screen right now is one that I pulled. It's an August 13th date, and what they're doing is they're recommending. So this is not a requirement. We'll follow recommendations, and with the plan that's been developed, we're not doing anything in excess of what the CDC or the Minnesota Department of Health requires us to do. When they say it's a recommendation, we're treating it as a recommendation. So we're going to walk through that plan a little later this morning, and this is the one that will have board approval, but we have to have some way in which we can modify that, perhaps on short notice. So with that, one of the paragraphs that was added from what you had seen 2 weeks ago as a preliminary plan, of what you had seen as a parent, there is a provision for modification in there. And if we have board action on that, we need the 72-hour time period for notification, which makes it difficult for bringing it back to the board for action. So one suggestion that's been made is that the board chairperson is involved in a discussion. The way that I think that gets facilitated here is that we have our incident command team meet. We have a discussion about any significant change that will occur. Have a vote of approval by our chairperson, and then notification of board, and then that notification goes out to our families after that. There is some contention across the state of doing something like this because one board member, such as board chair, doesn't have the authority to act unless you're providing them the authority to act. So if you approve the plan, you're shortening that time span. So when we talk about that safe return to in-person learning later this morning, with your approval today, there is one more opportunity for the whole board to look at that on September 1st before our school year starts. But it would be great to have the approval today so we can get that document out to our families and have them know what is going forward. I won't go through the CDC mask update. You can certainly read that, but the key point from the CDC and from the Department of Health in Minnesota and from MDE, it still is local control. You have the opportunity to make the decision. So I think that's really, really great for us. As I mentioned last time, that there is some burden upon you as board members to approve something that could be challenged in the future. So that's the legal counsel part. So we're following recommendations. We're kind of in lockstep with recommendations as far as things that are required from the Department of Health and the CDC. Those are in the plan as well, so you're protected that we're following that plan right now. Negotiations update. It's been kind of a quick rush here. Michelle's done a lot of work to pull things together, but we've completed the Education Association. That was the first one done. We've done the 9-month, we've done the 12-month. We had our first meeting with the 12-month group. We have 4 individual contracts that we'll be discussing on Friday if the schedule works out. And then next week, we'll look at picking up the rest of those. Item number 4, the referendum publications. Prior to the last vote in November, we had a lengthy booklet that was shared. Zerberg is using their staff, and they're putting together a more condensed version of something for our current proposal, and they'll include the data that we provide to them. So that document is expected to be finished on September 1st, so you'll have an opportunity to review that at the next meeting. And then our fall workshop schedule, we begin with some workshops next Monday for new teachers and for some paraprofessionals. Then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have workshops again. Wednesday is the all-district staff. Michelle will be present for that and do a greeting and a message for our staff. And we'll get everybody back here. And the nice thing we'll have this year is we can meet in large group. We can meet without masks. Masks are recommended. People can choose to wear them if they would like to, but we see a lot more freedoms this year than we did last year as far as how we function within our facilities. So that concludes my report, unless there's some questions.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
have one question. Are we still meeting today for negotiations or not? Originally today, okay, so we don't have that one scheduled.
All right, we'll move into our consent agenda. On the back page of the agenda here, we do have 5 items up for board approval. Number 1 is approve the hire of Joan Hanze as 1.0 FTE kindergarten teacher at North Elementary at VA Step 2. Number 2 is approve Tony Thorpe as social studies teacher beginning the 2021-2022 school year at VA Step 0. Number 3 is accept the resignation of secondary paraprofessional Alicia Stein. Number 4, accept the resignation of secondary paraprofessional David Stone. And number 5, approve the hire of Quinn Olson as secondary paraprofessional at Step 1. Questions or comments about the consent agenda? Seeing as none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Opposed, the same sign. Moving on to new business. Number 1, final reading of the following policies with statutory and recommended changes by MSBA, which for these policies, if you recall, there weren't any recommended changes. You will be approving today policy number 304, superintendent contract duties and evaluation. Policy number 305, policy implementation. Policy number 306, administrator code of ethics. And policy number 401, the equal employment opportunity. Questions or comments? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve these policies. And a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to number 2, consider and approve the resolution accepting donations. Today we have just one donation on the donation sheet, which is from Community Healthcare Auxiliary for $500 for change makers. Questions or comments about the donations? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve the resolution accepting donations as read. And a second.
Second.
Move into a roll call vote, starting with Christensen. Gross.
Yes.
Eskon's a yes. Sabalic.
Yes.
Sandsted.
Yes.
Strunk.
Yes.
And Allred. Very good. Moving on to number 3, consider and approve e-learning for FY22. Mr. Hoagie, do you care to provide some background information here?
Sure, a little bit. WCA previously had an e-learning plan, and the way that it functioned was if we had an inclement weather day, staff members would use the first 2 hours of the day preparing their lesson, and then at 10:30 they would, or 10 o'clock, they then communicate with our students in their home setting. COVID's taught us a lot, distance learning's taught us a lot, that we can do much better for instruction when our students are learning remotely. And also we now have one-to-one deployment of devices for all of our students, so that makes it even more possible. The one hang up with e-learning is that, if we're going to serve our students when they're at home, they need their devices at home. High school students will typically take their laptops home on a daily basis. Middle school students quite regularly. When we get to fifth grade and younger, not always so much, and especially as we get younger yet, our teachers actually encourage those to be left in the building because we'd rather have them there than have them forgotten at home, and then we have students that don't have them in the building. So with an inclement weather day, we oftentimes have a previous indication, prior indication that the next day's weather might not be so good. So teachers will have to do a little planning that this will be, tomorrow might be a day in which we don't have school in session, so they have to plan a little bit. So the change that we've made, Mrs. Prash and Miss Prash and Mrs. Knudsen had shared with me how their staff will function in a e-learning day. And for the elementary, it'll be 2 live lessons that would happen, one in the morning for language arts, the afternoon for math. And then the teacher is online during that time, so as students are working through, they have an opportunity to work their lesson and then have access to the teacher during the day. For grades 5 through 12, it's a little bit different in which those students have functioned well in their period by the day. So those students will actually log in just as they did for distance learning, and they have their lesson presented during that time. So there won't be a big change from what they do from one day to the next. It'll just be continuation, but it'll be a remote learning process. So those changes were included into the e-learning plan. So that document was provided for you. And we also have frequently asked questions that have been revised, and then also some instructions for the teachers that have been updated. So our administrative proposal for you is to approve the e-learning plan for FY22, and that would be for we have our first inclement weather day would be covered by a TOPS day, which teachers do a pre-school year work day. They kind of bank a day, so when we have that first storm day, there's nothing that's made up. And then after that, there'd be 5 e-learning days, which is the maximum that's allowed by the Department of Education.
Questions from the board?
So we have one day which doesn't have to be made up, just planned into the calendar.
And then the next are 5 e-learning days, and then after that, we be approaching you with a suggestion on what we do for the remaining days, and all likely a calendar adjustment to recover those days.
How many extra instructional days do we have than what are required?
With our calendar for this coming year, we reduced our instructional days by 1. And with the way that Labor Day fell in and Memorial Day fell in, and tried to have our instruction between those 2 holidays, as we attempted to do that, we were finding that we couldn't work everything in during the course of the year and then still have those 2 days at the beginning of the year that are preparing conference days. So we've reduced our calendar from either 173 to 172 or 172 to 171. And as far as how many days we have extra, it's not counted in days, it's counted in hours of instruction. So with the hours of instruction, we easily meet that hourly instruction at the elementary because it's fewer hours. At the high school level, we have hours that are banked. That's about 6 days of accumulated hours that are over and above the minimum standard of Minnesota.
I would add to that though, and maybe I think I follow where you're going, Darren, but the other piece of that puzzle is the duty days that teachers are required per their master contract. So it's like a balance, even though we're not required or we're exceeding the number of hours that are required of the state minimum for our kids to be in the classroom, there's also the duty days that we have to try and meet.
My question is leading to the question of, we feel like our parents on a snow day, we have one day that we don't have to make up, but if there's a snow day, do we feel like our parents want us to do e-learning right away, or do they prefer that a snow day is just a snow day, and maybe we have, if we need to have more calendar days, or where are our parents at when it comes to this e-learning? Do we have a feel for what their expectations are? And like Mr. Hoey indicated, might be different between elementary and high school level. So,
Before we didn't have e-learning, and there were a lot of people requesting that we had that option. I mean, I remember that. And then I'm just trying to think.
and I do too.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if, okay, so they may have, do they still want it? Right? So now we've tried it a little bit. Are we still on the path that we want to be on or not? I don't know.
I think, from a parent perspective, if you were asking me feedback, I would be so focused on the distance learning environment we came out of rather than thinking about the just needing to make up snow days so that we're not extending our school year or eating up an Easter break, for example, where families have vacations. This may be one of those that you try it for a year and then you get that feedback, just so that we can get away from maybe some of the not so good memories that are had from the lengthy, extensive distance learning that you had, and then, certainly circle back. And I know Natalie and Susan have been great about periodically doing surveys and get some of that parent feedback.
And I think that, like, just knowing, I was gonna follow up with what you were saying,
Well, there's something.
but we're obviously not wanting to have 5 e-learning days. It's just that if you have a year where there's a ton of inclement weather, that you need to have that opportunity. And I'm on the same page too, when I'm thinking about that, is most people don't want to take those days taken away because there's, things people plan
Yep.
to
I
take
don't want
off.
that either.
And at the end of the year, no one wants to go to school further into June than they have to. I mean, that's just the way I look at it. Oh,
I know our surrounding districts have done it, right? Just the feedback.
For a while.
Yeah, prior to COVID, they
Yeah.
really liked it, and it's a very limited audience, of course, but is exactly what Sarah said, we planned a trip around.
Yeah,
Easter
I don't
break
think
or
we should.
whatever, and now you lost it, so.
I don't
they
like
loved
that.
it, they loved it,
I don't like having to make up like on President's Day or anything like that. I'm just wondering how our parents feel. Would they rather have, we only have one day that they don't make up, right? I mean, it's not like we have 3. With a district our size, one that they don't make up maybe isn't enough because we have so much, many of our students have to come on buses. So I guess just, for me, it's just a question of how do the parents feel about doing it this way, or if there's a different way that they want to do it, do they want more days without having to make anything up, do they want distance learning?
well, I don't think that's
Further, I
the
mean,
balance so far is we can't have many more days without making them up because of our contract.
Balancing the duty days versus the state
Right.
requirements, and I'm sure there's extensive conversation that was had by the principals about elementary versus high school, and do you set it the same, or do you kind of follow what the state's doing? And our master contract doesn't, I guess, specify duty days based on which level you're at. It's the same across the board. So I'd encourage us to try it this year and then solicit some feedback from parents as we get away from maybe last year's distance learning memories and how much time was spent behind screens, and put our finger on the pulse then and see what parents are thinking.
I would agree. I'm not against doing it the way that it's planned right now. It's just my question is, okay, so when we get through this, if we have a normal year, which we hope we do, then maybe we do ask the parents how they feel, where they want, and the staff and everybody together and just kind of see where everybody's at.
Probably your question really goes back to March and April when we had a group of staff members and administrators that talked about our calendar and how do we set that up and how do we do that. And that's when we had our discussion about the one top stay and the 5 e-learning days. So the calendar was approved, I think in April is when the calendar was approved. So that's when our days were approved to put those 5 in there. So the plan now is just explaining how we're going to accomplish those. So your point is very well taken, Darren. I think as we get through the year, like Michelle has suggested, is we're going from an e-learning schedule that we had 2 years ago, which was a top day at e-learning, then a makeup day, and then e-learning. We went back and forth on those, and frankly, we don't have days in the schedule the way those holidays fall to provide that guaranteed President's Day off or Martin Luther King Day and the Easter Sunday. So as we get, for us to hit the 6 lost days to inclement weather, it's not very likely, but it has happened. And there may be some board members here that faced that a few years back, because I certainly did in my previous position, which we had an enormous number of days lost because of inclement weather, so it can happen. But I think, our principal should probably keep the pulse on this and see how things work out. If we should have e-learning days and then plan them with a calendar, with discussions next February or March when we start that discussion. But thank you, Darren.
Very good. I have a motion.
Yeah, I'll move to approve.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. Moving on to number 4, consider and approve the safe return to in-person learning plan. Mr. Hoagie, I assume there's some background information here as well that you'd like to share.
Yeah, there'll be a little bit. So the opening paragraphs, I don't believe that there any change there from what you saw previously, but, and I think it's important for us to go line by line for your review on what we're doing, and please bear with me and have some patience as I explain the rationale for some of these. In-person 5 days a week, I mean, highly supported decision to be in class 5 days a week rather than being in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is a home student contact day and the additional prep time. Last year, the Wednesday worked out well for us because state mandate required us to give an additional 2.5 hours per week of preparation to our staff members because they were teaching in a dual format. So when we're back in school 5 days a week and not doing distance learning, that's advantageous for our students, which is number one for us. But our parents, our families really support the in-person instruction as well. And then our teachers really, they manage it well, but there's a lot of extra work for them to deal with students at home, plus those in the classroom, because you're not only monitoring kids in the classroom and providing instruction, but you're also watching those remote sites as well and trying to keep those students engaged. So we will not be doing distance learning. Last year was a requirement by the state that we had to provide distance learning to any family that chose not to be in regular instruction. And it didn't have to be a medical condition. It could just be a choice that they might have thought that it was better, it was a preferred option. So we will not be offering distance learning with our instructors. If an individual or a family decides that they don't want to be in school, we'll encourage them to go solicit an online school or to do homeschool instruction. Absences due to quarantine will be managed as other absences. So there will be periods when we'll have students that aren't in the building. We're looking to shorten that quarantine period as short as we can. And for individuals that have been masked, or excuse me, that have been vaccinated, and if they wore a mask, their quarantine period could be as little as 3 days, and then they'd be back in the building again. Face coverings or masks, as we usually refer to it. Perhaps I should ask any questions regarding instruction before I go on to face coverings. Okay. Face coverings are mask mandate that as we usually refer to it. It's going to be recommended for indoor activities, but it's not required. And then the second line of that, any parent who wants their child to wear a mask or face covering will be supported by school personnel. There is a suspicion that there may be some taunting or bullying or harassing of students or families that choose to wear masks. And our staff members will be very cautious about making sure that somebody that has chosen to wear the mask has the right to do that without having any negative repercussions. The Center for Disease Control requires masks on public transportation, which includes school buses. So we will include that not only on school buses that Palmer operates, but we'll include also on the vehicles that we drive and the vans that Palmer shuttles also. So we don't want to have an inconsistency there. The rationale for CDC to have the masks required on public transportation, I won't question that, but since that's a requirement, I and you have a responsibility to follow that and to enforce that. And I had a conversation with Steve Escobar, Transportation Director, and Palmer has given information to their local bus contractors also on how to manage that. Passengers refusing to wear approved face covering will not be allowed to enter the vehicle. So if If they show up at the bus and don't have a mask, one will be offered to them. If they choose not to take it, the individual will be returned to the house, provided there's an adult at home that can take care of that child. If an individual should get on the bus and make a habit of removing the mask and refusing to wear it, then a conference with the parent will be held, and then alternative arrangements would need to be made for transportation. So it's a mask mandate that we need to comply with. Any questions regarding that part of the plan? Vaccinations, the district will not require vaccinations. As you watch the news, you'll see primarily medical facilities now are requiring their staff to be vaccinated. And there are businesses that require their staff to be vaccinated. We will not go that direction. There are some serious implications if we require vaccination that has adverse effects, and that burden falls upon us for requiring that. So it's certainly not in this plan that we're going to require vaccinations. The CDC and the MDH recommend vaccinations for eligible students and adults. And along with that, if we have staff members or students that have that vaccination, there are provisions for that quarantine time to be shortened from 14 days to less than 5. And then if somebody claims that they've had a vaccination, they want that quarantine period shortened, they will need to provide proof of that vaccination. So with that card that we get as we're vaccinated, that will have to be provided as proof or as evidence that we can shorten that quarantine period. And the question's been asked, is that private data? Immunization records are public data, so that's something that we can have. Social distancing, we took great strides last year for social distancing, raised rooms, so we had 6 feet of space. We separated students. We encouraged them to keep separate at different times of the day as they pass from class to class. Our rooms will be arranged now with a 3-foot spacing at a minimum. That close contact description is still the same. It's within 6 feet for 15 minutes throughout the day. It used to be a sustained 15 minutes, but now it's accumulated. But if you think of our typical classroom, if we have the 3 feet and if we're going for 15 minutes per day, these students are moving from classroom to classroom at the upper level in the elementary building. They're going to be in that same location. So if we do have to do contact tracing, close contact tracing, and perhaps quarantine, we have a very small number of students that will be impacted. There's no restriction on school transportation. I mentioned this earlier today, that our buses can be filled to the bus's capacity now, and that means 3 to a seat. Most of the time for our elementary, you can put 3 kids in that seat. If we're using it for an activity bus, and if you've been on a bus, you know that it's 2 high school students in a seat is still cozy. Any questions on social distancing?
Can a student ask to be, if we're gonna have 3 feet, student is concerned about quarantine, can they ask to be 6 feet apart of their room?
They'll go as wide as they can with a minimum of 3 feet. So if we have space, and last year in the majority of classrooms, we had 6 feet. So we keep them separated. If they come together to work in a group, we're not going to have this big concern. If a secondary instructor says, okay, we're going to work on some collaboration now, and the 4 of us pull up to the table and we have a discussion, we won't be quite as concerned about that anymore because we're not having 15 minutes of sustained contact within that short distance. But when we have this transmission, I mean, we're in Grant County and at WCA, we're really a low transmission area. And you think about the sparsity of transportation, the risk for us is minimal. So what we're attempting to do with this plan is we're attempting to manage risk, and we're trying to allow our staff and our students to get back to what is a more traditional or common classroom activity. But yeah, you're right. There's kind of an inconsistency there. 6 feet is the definition. 3 feet is what we're trying to keep the distance at as a minimum. But if we should have students identified as being positive, we'll do contact tracing with those individuals. We are contracting with a nurse to serve us again for 32 hours a week. Previously, that had been 8 hours split between 3 buildings. But last year, we had a 32 for 3 buildings. And we'll use ESSER funds to pay for that additional time as we did last year. It's non-general fund expenditures for us. Did I answer your question, Darren?
Yeah, a little bit, I guess. can't be quarantined based on a positive test on, they'd have that opportunity if the space was available. In some instances, the space won't be available, but
We'll have that discussion administratively and then with our staff also, and try to keep that space as broad as possible during the school day. Thank you. Contact tracing, my initial thought on this was, we're not gonna do it as a district. Because if somebody's tests positive, the individual that goes to the physician is gonna have a quarantine period. And we were taking on the responsibility, I think, of our medical facilities and doing the contact tracing, because really, they're the ones that have the individual that's infected, and when it's a school system, we took this on. But I think for us to handle it in a prompt manner, I think we need to take it on rather than rely on an outside entity to do that contact tracing for us. So we can address it a little more promptly than the medical profession. And then the question came up, will we do contact tracing on the bus? And we're not, last year we had situations in which if we had people on the bus and someone tested positive, we quarantined the whole bus because they were on there for 15 minutes or more. We're not going to do that because there's evidence that shows that if both parties are masked up, the risk of transmission is really minimal. So we struggled with that last year okay, we had close proximity and why does everybody get quarantined? But that's just the hand we were dealt last year. So this year, we won't do any contact tracing on transportation on our buses or private vehicles because everybody on that bus, including the driver, should be masked. The only exception is if the driver's on the vehicle with no passengers, then the driver doesn't need to be masked. So I hope I don't get calls where somebody sees a bus driving down the road and they tell me that the driver wasn't wearing the mask. Well, if there's nobody else on there, they do not need to wear the mask. So that's the one exception.
So I just have a question since we're talking about that. That kind of eliminates the majority of, last year, a lot of the contact, right, was the buses.
It was.
There were situations, so I think that, just because I know there's people that 3 times got quarantined because of being on the bus, so.
And the dilemma for us across the district is we had at times over 100 students in quarantine, and primarily from bus transportation. Quarantine, we have to.
Just one question, do we have any numbers from those quarantines, how many students actually tested positive after that?
We think one. Suspect one, because it was one of our first situations, was fall sport, and we had a person identified on a team that was COVID positive, and then it may have been on the bus, it may have been on the bench, it may have been from an outside source, so that's the one we have. So, when we look at the extreme measures we needed to take last year, not by our choice, but by mandates, it caused a lot of students to be out of school. Quarantine, any medical provider, if Terry goes to the physician and he's identified positive, he's a senior in high school, and they say that he's going to be out for 14 days, we monitor that quarantine, we treat his absence as a regular absence. So we honor those quarantines that are set by other individuals. We have I don't know if I shared this with you, but we do have a staff member at WCA, husband and wife in the home, and I think 4 children in the house. One of the children identified as COVID positive. So that person obviously needs to quarantine for 14 days. The children in that household who haven't had the opportunity to be vaccinated yet, after that last day of the 14th day for that infected person, now the quarantine is 14 days beyond that, which puts them at the end of August. So we have a staff member, husband and wife, both vaccinated. And the physician indicated that the children need to be quarantined and that the 2 adults should be. So that kind of leaves us in limbo, and that's where I contacted our district attorney and I said, how do we manage this? And the advice is since the medical professionals said that they should be, but not a 14-day, a 10-day, they're vaccinated. It was advised that that individual stay out and we honor the medical professionals, should be as a recommendation, so.
So is that should be 10 days after the first quarantine or?
We have 10 days after that first one, so it's during our workshop days that the individual will return. When we have situations within the building or athletic contests in which somebody's been identified as COVID positive, we'll look at quarantine and we'll look at minimizing that as much as we can. And if they're vaccinated, that could be as little as 3 days under certain circumstances and criteria. It could be no quarantine period. The longest I think we need to go with an in-house one is 10 days. That's both the test. They talk about when you reinsert yourself into the public, you have to be in an area, if you're going into an area that there's a high risk of transmission, then it's supposed to be 14 days. But when they identify a facility as what type of facility is that, they say like a care facility. They don't mention a care facility or a school. And since we haven't had a high rate of transmission last year, we'll presume that we can go 10 days until we would have an indication otherwise. So the third bullet there, it depends upon the nature of the exposure, if the person is vaccinated or not, and whether they have symptoms. And then students and staff are fully vaccinated and free from symptoms will not need to quarantine. So that's a positive thing.
Quick question too, how are we gonna handle, or do you have a plan around, individuals that claim to have been exposed, right? We felt like there was almost truancy last year, is there, how do we follow up?
They claim they've been
Yeah,
exposed.
so, okay, I was with Maya last night, and not, he potentially has, so I take.
Well, that's a good question for the principals and the deans of schools. We haven't, we treat those situations if we're suspicious. We'll ask for a physician's statement. If somebody does this one time, we'll probably think, okay, but if this individual is claiming exposure, every 4 to 5 weeks, we might want to have a physician's statement and some evidence of exposure, so.
We also called Grant County last year when that happened, more than once to one family, like they just pulled their child. So we let the county know and they sent a police officer over to check on a family and the child was back the next day, so.
We were also told by public health in our last meeting, that we call and do ask an individual to stay home and they go out and say, well, I've been vaccinated. Our school nurse actually has access to those vaccination records, because vaccinations are not private,
They're not HIPAA protected.
yeah. So they can look that up, so we only need to call them kids that haven't been, we'll know which ones have been.
Okay, anything else on quarantine? Okay, testing. Fresh off the press yesterday, the Minnesota Department of Education is going to assist school district with establishing a testing program. So too new for me to give you any information for September. First meeting, we'll have a plan to facilitate testing here. The advantage of that is that we can get people back into the classroom sooner, whether they're a staff member or a student, and the testing can be done locally. The 7-day quarantine period doesn't seem as though it's going to fit with us, but we'll make sure that it can't before we formally rule that out. Other precautions, these are the things that most of you learned from your parents, about taking care of yourself. And we became a little more diligent about washing hands and hand sanitizer and all those things. So we'll continue to do those things. With MDH and MDE, when they give us recommendations and requirements, we'll implement those as needed. Meals, Mrs. Knudsen came to me with this one, just a plea that came from, I think, multiple students. Can we please have seconds, within the food program? So last year during COVID, we had situations in which, a lot of care taken, and we packaged foods, handed, we have plexiglass in there, and it was, you take your meal, you take your bag, you go to your seat, sit down, you eat, and you don't come back. We've talked with our food service director, and we'll be able to go back to more formal serving. Seconds will be provided, but they'll be with a charge because it's the basic meal, it's free and covered by USDA. So if they want seconds on a main entree, or if they want a second milk, then those things will be charged. So we're really hoping for a food service delivery to go back to what it was previously. So our students can be fed. And you know, when they have the meals provided, they meet the minimum nutritional requirements. But when we have a student that you know is on the bus early, they stay for an after-school activity, it gets to be a long period of time from lunch until the end of that activity. The other change for meal service, I'm sure you remember the dots on the seats out there, so you had to sit in specific locations. We always left a seat empty or attempt to leave a seat empty. We'll be back to filling the seats again if we choose to do that. Communication changes, if there's any changes that happen to our plan, whether they're done by board or done as I explained earlier with consultation with the board chair, that we communicated through our messaging system. The plans will be posted on our website. If there's a change, it'll be updated. And we will, as a district, will distribute information from the CDC, the Department of Health, MDE, Horizon Public Health. We'll be a facilitator, get that in the hands of families. It's not that we're supporting or making a recommendation. We're facilitating for families that might want that information. If families don't care for it, they can just, you know, delete the email, delete the message. But we do feel that there are families that want that, so we'll give families an option to refuse the offer. And then the last paragraph just talks about change. We have to expect change again. Hopefully we don't see much of it. Hopefully the Delta variant or any other variants don't cause the dilemma in our areas they have in other areas of the country. But, you know, talking to our staff members, especially the administrators, our parents did a great job with the requirements we placed last year. Our students did remarkably well. And we asked a lot of our teachers, you know, in addition to that, and you know, we were pretty fortunate that we had everybody kind of buying into what we needed to do, and we hope we get the same kind of support this year. But with the approval of the plan today, keep in mind that it's fluid, it can change. So if when this hits the newspaper and hits our parents' emails again as an approved plan, we have an opportunity to change before the school year starts. And then if there's something urgent that has to be taken care of, if you approve, we'll have an opportunity to do that with our incident command team and Chair Nesman.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have this out as soon as we can, so I'm not that we're going to approve stakes. I know a lot of other schools have already got their plans out. And unfortunately, I think there's people making decisions on where they go to school based on some of this stuff.
Well, they will.
Yeah.
It's no secret. They are.
Right.
And you know, I don't know of a school in our area that's requiring masks. The thing that's kind of in limbo is that quarantine piece, but there's a statement within that CDC guideline that I had up there. You need to quarantine. We don't have an option not to. So I'm not sure how they are managing that, or maybe that won't be approved at their board meeting. But there are several of the school districts in that area either having their board meeting today, probably tonight, or next Monday or Tuesday. So we're all pretty much in the same situation here. We talk. We don't want to lose kids and inappropriately draw kids from other districts based upon our COVID policy.
Well, I just think the fact that they are going to have to quarantine on busing, that's huge, because I mean, everyone knows they're taking a risk, you know, being in sports and all the other things that they're in, that there's a possibility they're going to get quarantined for those things, but I think that bus can really put a lot of pressure on.
Any other questions or comments? Motion to approve by Mr. Ulrich, second by Strunk. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to number 5, consider and approve the land purchase agreement for a South Elementary School site. Mr. Hoagie, do you want to bring the board up to speed with your most recent conversations?
Absolutely. I think I shared with you last time that both our district attorney and surveyor and the assessor's office all indicated that we should have a specific description of the property to be shared. So the survey was completed, that's done. Shared the document, I emailed it to the property owner on August 4th, trusting that it would go through. I called on Monday, and because I sent the legal description last Thursday, and I asked if he received the email, and he said, no, I haven't. So, you trust, and it didn't get kicked back to me, so we shared that then on Monday, so he's got the agreement. We've talked about all of the language in there. We've talked about the job description. So we're in a position in which my expectation is that he will approve that purchase agreement as written. So what I would like from you this morning, provided you plan to go through this, is an approval of the purchase agreement for the south property located in Hoffman.
Questions or comments from the board? Seeing as none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the land purchase agreement for a South Elementary site.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to number 6, consider and approve the land purchase agreement for a baseball and softball field complex for the secondary school. Mr. Hoagie?
Yeah, we had started this agreement last year prior to the election. It would have been sometime in the summer and fall in which we had the agreement developed for the property that sits to the west of this site. And upon reflection, decided to remove that from the table and not include it as a part of our building bond referendum. So the agreement's the same. What's been changed, the attorney representing the party has changed the dates on the agreement. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. The only stipulations, there's a purchase price allocated for last year, and now that amount has changed because of the additional year of CRP. So that is added back in.
Very good. Questions or comments from the board?
Move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve by Mr. Zabalik. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Opposed, the same sign. Moving on to number 7, consider and approve the resolution relating to determining the necessity of issuing general obligation bonds and calling a special election therefrom. Mr. Hoagie, do you want to lead the discussion here? I assume there might be some.
The resolution's been prepared. The questions we've worked through at multiple meetings, revised the language, and with this resolution, and if there would be a successful vote, then those 2 contracts that you approved previously would be in effect. If the election's not successful, those contracts are not, because they're contingent upon a successful resolution. So what this resolution does is it puts us into a position in which you could have the November 2021 election. And the deadline for notification to our auditors is August 20th. So this would be your opportunity to set an election date for the 2nd of November.
I had one question. I know Mr. Hoagie, you did some extensive research on time of the year and where we might see the most success in passing building bonds. Did any of that research also include coupling or uncoupling questions? Just wanting to address Mr. Swanson's comments this morning, which I appreciate very much. It also is such a, I could flip a coin on do you couple them together or do you not, looking at the pros and cons of both sides of that. And just for the sake of discussion, I think if we weren't looking at such a huge discussion about what to do with facilities, right? If we were just talking about enhancements to programming and talking about sports complex, coupling becomes a much easier decision. We talk about how lengthy of an amount of time that we've had discussion on what to do with facilities and coming to the decision that we have today, maybe not so much. So Do you have any insight there, Mr. Hoagie, you'd be able to shed for us?
I probably can't address it statistically, but just through observation, when you have multiple questions, question one can pass, and as you go down the list, there's less likelihood that those additional questions won't pass. One thing that we've heard throughout the entire process here is that our district supports those things. We heard that at our community leaders meeting, that an assessment was made if we get the right question on the ballot for question one, if question one passes, those other things will pass as well. They'll support those. Is that a guarantee? No, but Mr. Swanson's absolutely right that I don't know if it's dead in the water, but the chances of passing are less than question one. But the other reason that we split those is that there still might be some uncertainty of passing question one, and questions 2 and 3 have been deemed very viable also. So they're not contingent upon number one. Question number one could fail, and questions 2 and 3 could pass. And as we look at this, and I know there's the concern about the sports facilities, and as we address the public, we need to make it, abundantly clear what the true cost of questions 2 and 3 are. For question 2, it's about on a $100,000 home, it's about $18 a year. On question 2, it's about $20 a year. Now the softball field complex and the track and field complex aren't of equal value, but if we divide that 20 by that $20 a year in a $100,000 home by 2, it's $10 for each one. And then if you look at what that costs per month, it's less than $1 a month. So when you look at what does it cost per day, it's a very small cost, less than 50 cents a day, for those questions. So it's a very small investment daily, monthly, and annually to really bring our facility to a point. So I think that the task is there for us to really explain how these kind of fulfill or complete our entire site, and that now we're set for 20, 25 years, at least for the length of the bond, before we have something else. The only thing that would change that is if there be substantial growth in our elementaries or substantial growth in the secondary, which we'd have to add more space. And at north, there's still space to add on classroom areas. At south, there's definitely space to add on classroom areas. At south, we can add another gym. At north, it becomes a little more difficult to add another gym. But if we should have substantial increase in enrollment, which isn't out of the question, that requires more space, that can be done. But we do have flex rooms at each of our elementary sites. We also have freed up a couple of class or 3 classrooms here with moving 5th grade away, because now we have 3 classrooms again. So we have room for growth within this site. We have room for growth within the proposals. We don't have as much room for growth as we projected with one site, because we were looking at, I think, 3 or 4 flex rooms in one site. With our 2 north and south campuses, we have either 1 or 2 flex rooms, and that's it. So we're a little tighter, but there is some room. And then also within that classroom, we have room for growth within the classrooms before we would need a 3rd section at north and south. So, I respect your opinion greatly, but we had the minimal talk about bundling into one, and we kind of went back to what we had with rather than 4 questions, we went to 3, basically for the same rationale. We certainly don't want to have a throwaway question, have it on there, giving the indication that it's not important for us. I feel, and I think the board members feel, all 3 are important to us.
But we need your voice in the public.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened the last go around. Even afterwards, everybody said, well, everybody got the information, but people didn't get the information. People didn't know that the questions weren't tied together. People didn't know that the STEAM and that was going to enhance programming here at well, that's exactly what the question was, so people didn't know what was on there or what it was about. So we need that help. We need more voices out there to say, hey, this is a good thing for West Central area as a district, so that we can make all these pass. We wouldn't put them on there if we didn't want them to pass. But we didn't want one to fail because somebody didn't want this, or somebody thought that it should only be academics, so that if you put the athletics in there, we're not going to vote yes. No, we want them all to pass, but we want to make sure you understand what they're doing.
30 years. And I think we want, we want progress in the most heartfelt way right now, since, since 2012, right, we failed on one site. 13, we failed on 3 sites. We failed again on one site in 20. And so when we had running school perceptions, I'll just use that, we went through all this, consultation, survey. One of the things they said is a lot of people are passionate about arts, a lot are athletics, a lot are, maybe ag or CT, career in technology. And they said, if you want progress, you got to make that first question as simple as you can. So we went round and round as a board and followed us around how we can, I think a lot of us feel we really want it. Like Maya said, I'd say probably the majority does, would like it all, that's what we want on there. But what can we get to pass too? What's progress look like? So that's what we're hoping is that we can make some progress on this process that's been, 10 years. The communities have been working on it, and it's been divisive and challenging. We'll see where we go.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? No. The ballot questions as well as the resolution were provided in the board packet for review prior to today's meeting. I will summarize the resolution. I will not be reading it word for word, but we'll do a summary of the resolution, and then I'll ask for a motion to accept the resolution as presented in the board packet, and we'll move forward into a roll call vote after a second. So be it resolved by the school board, the Board of Independent School District number 2342, West Central Area Schools, Minnesota, the school district as follows. It is hereby found, determined, and declared as follows. The board has investigated the facts and does hereby find, determine, and declare that it is necessary and expedient to issue general obligation school building bonds of the school district in an aggregate amount not to exceed $37,030,000 for construction of a new South Elementary School in Hoffman. B, to issue general obligation school building bonds of the school district in an aggregate amount not to exceed $4,870,000 for acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities, for expanding classroom spaces and labs, adding equipment and furniture, and to support STEAM, career and technical education, student fitness center, and media center. C, issue general obligation school building bonds of the school district in an aggregate amount not to exceed $5,495,000 for acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities, including but not limited to construction and equipping of a track and field complex, construction of a softball and baseball field complex, and to repair and upgrade other outdoor grounds and structures. The projects described in paragraph 1 will be submitted to the Commissioner of Education of the state of Minnesota for review and comment. Questions or comments?
You should also note the 37 million for the South Elementary. That also includes the North Elementary.
Oh, yes, it does. Thank you.
It's not just one, you're right.
No, it is not just one. So to summarize, A is to issue general obligation school building bonds of the school district in an aggregate amount not to exceed $37,030,000 for acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities, including construction of a new South Elementary site and construction and renovation at North Elementary School in Owl Lake. Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
That'd be a really nice school.
Yeah.
And that's my goodness, you think we're getting emails and calls now. Any other questions, comments, or corrections? Seeing as none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the resolution as presented in the board packet. And a second?
Second.
I'll move into a roll call vote, starting with Christensen.
Yes.
Gross.
Yes.
Nessman is a yes. Sabalic.
Yes.
Sandsted.
Yes.
Strunk.
Yes.
And Ulrich. Very good. That brings us to other on our agenda, and I will ask for a motion to approve going into closed session to discuss negotiations planning. And a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes.